A few comments about bribery and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act before you work on your final exam, which is an analysis of the Mideast Airlines case. First, I want to be explicit that bribery requires an explicit agreement between a public official and a corporate officer or employee to give that public official money to violate the public official's duty to his office. You have to understand a public official has an obligation to perform their duties for the benefit of the public, just like you have a duty of loyalty to your employer. So when a public official makes an agreement with an individual to explicitly act contrary to the public interest in exchange for something of value, that constitutes bribery. For bribery to exist, there must be an explicit agreement to violate the official's duty of loyalty to execute their public responsibilities. So be careful before you jump to a conclusion that bribery exists. I also want you to recognize that extortion is to compel someone to do something that's contrary to their interest, pay money or do something else in exchange for basically releasing a hostage or some other thing that can damage that individual both personally or their family member. Extortion may be morally justifiable under some circumstances, but extortion doesn't exist if the individual is being asked to do what they ought to do anyhow. So be careful again before you jump to a conclusion. Now finally, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act was adopted to prevent mostly American companies from bribing public officials to basically prefer that company to other American companies or foreign competitors. It is a violation of the very principle of capitalism. It is basically bribing someone to, if you will, destroy the market and prefer one competitor over another competitor. So its purpose is to prevent that and preserve the actual nature of capitalism that we claim to want. But again, be careful, because it is very clear that we need to exempt from the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act individuals, public officials, or inspectors, or custom people, or police officers, or anyone else who's a public employee from just merely executing what it is that's already been approved. We call those ministerial acts. They can be small acts or they can be large acts. Let me give you an example. If you have all the inspections you need on a new house you're building, which could be 13 or 14 between inspection of the foundation, inspection of the framing, inspection of the plumbing and wiring and insulation, and then the final sign-off inspection. And you take all those to the town clerk to get a certificate of occupancy, which you are absolutely entitled to if you give that clerk all the requisite inspections. Let's say the clerk refuses to give you that certificate of occupancy, even though you're entitled to it and you've handed in all the requisite inspections. That's illegal for the clerk to refuse to do that unless you give that clerk some kind of consideration, because he or she's under a duty of loyalty to give you the certificate of occupancy. You follow? That's important. However, an individual who's merely exercising a ministerial duty, for example, releasing a cargo to be put on a cargo container ship from China to the United States, after that container has been certified by the custom officials as being lawful, the mere release of something is a ministerial duty. Therefore, be careful. The carrying out of a prior decision is a ministerial duty, even though it may be a very significant one or have very significant economic consequences. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act properly excludes those from prohibited activities because they aren't fundamental to the decision of how business is going to be done.